It's Wednesday, and today we're learning about the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is one of the coolest things that we learn in algebra. If you ask anybody who's learned Algebra 1 in any recent years, they're going to tell you Pythagorean theorem and the quadratic formula. Those are the two things that sort of just stick with people. So we've learned how to solve quadratics up to this point by factoring, square root method, and now completing the square. So those three methods are fantastic. Factoring and the square root method are really good methods, but they only work some of the time. Completing the square works all the time, but it's a little messy if that middle number is odd, because then you gotta divide it in half, and then you have fractions, whatever. So thus enters the quadratic formula, which is, this guy. All right, so the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You're going to have to memorize this formula. Everyone memorizes it. It's just part of algebra. It's just a rite of passage. I'm going to tell you how I memorized it when I was in school. My teacher told me a story. And then part of your homework is going to be to watch some videos and then pick out your favorite quadratic formula song. There are some really good ones out there. So I'm sure you'll see a lot of high quality videos before you post on the group discussion your favorite one, because they're really good. Okay, so the way I learned it back in whatever, 8th grade or whenever I took algebra, so Bill and Bob are twins, so B squared, and they're throwing a party at their house, and they're super wealthy, so they have a butler, but their butler recently quit, so negative B. But he's like, man, the pay is really good, but also I don't like going in the basement. So he's like, should I go back? Should I not go back? So Bill and Bob are twins, throwing a party. Butler quit, and he's like, go back, not go back, go back, not go back. But anyway, at this party, they invited 4 awesome chicks. So 4 awesome chicks. But those 4 awesome chicks discover in the basement live 2 alligators. So those 4 awesome chicks leave. So negative butler plus or minus party house, Bill and Bob minus 4 awesome chicks all over 2 alligators. Her story was a little bit more elegant than that, but it has stuck with me all these years, so hopefully you guys remember. If nothing else, students usually remember minus 4 awesome chicks over 2 alligators. So make sure you have that part memorized. Okay, so this is the quadratic formula. It is super powerful. It actually has a whole bunch of elements in it. So first things first, we actually learned how to find the vertex by finding negative b over 2a, so it has that guy hidden in there. It also has this part right here, which is called the discriminant. And the discriminant is super awesome. The discriminant is just the part on the inside, so b squared minus 4ac. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the discriminant here for a couple minutes. I really want you guys to learn what this guy does. He's a really powerful tool. All right, so on the inside there, that discriminant, you have 3 possible outcomes. When you're plugging in numbers, b squared minus 4ac, from your quadratic, you're either going to get a number greater than 0 or a positive number. You're going to get a number equal to 0, so that's just obviously 0. Or you're going to get a number less than 0, so you're going to get a negative number. So if we think about what that actually means, we know that the discriminant is inside of a square root. So if I have a number inside of a square root, say I have square root of 4, how many different answers do I get? Well, I'm going to get positive 2 and negative 2. So I'm going to have 2 real solutions, meaning if I were to graph this guy, he would cross 2 separate times. So if your discriminant ends up being a positive number, it's going to be 2 real solutions. And we'll talk about what the exact value of the number means here in just a minute. Okay, if my inside the radical ends up being a 0, what's the square root of 0? Well, the square root of 0 is just 0. So you would have all this stuff, negative b plus or minus 0. Well, negative 5 plus 0, and negative 5 minus 0 is still a negative 5 over something. So you're only going to have 1 real solution, because you end up with the same thing, plus 0 minus 0. Which means if I were to graph this guy, he is going to bounce, and he's only going to have that one answer right there at that vertex. Okay, then our last option is that b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, meaning it's a negative number. If I had the square root of negative 7, well, that doesn't actually exist. It does imaginarily, but not real. So you're going to have no real solutions, meaning if I were to graph this, he would never cross that axis and I would have no real solutions. Okay, so when you're doing the discriminant, we're going to do that several times here, just a minute. You're going to do that first. You're going to see, do I have 2 solutions, 1 solution, or no solution? Beyond that, you just go ahead and finish out the quadratic formula. All right, so given a quadratic, we are going to go ahead and make sure it's in standard form. So x squared, x number equals 0. So boom, there it is. And then your values for a, b, and c just come from the coefficients directly in front. So this is a 1, b is a positive 1, and c is a negative 6. You're going to go ahead and plug these values straight into the quadratic formula. So x equals, negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times a is 1 and c is negative 6. All over 2 times 1. Okay, then you're just going to go ahead and do that math. Negative 1 plus or minus. When you type this in the calculator or whatever, that ends up being negative 4 times negative 6 is 24 plus 1 is 25. Okay, automatically, positive 25 means that I'm going to have 2 real solutions. Also, if your discriminant happens to be a perfect square, meaning it's 25, 16, 36, 49, whatever, that means this guy was factorable. That means that this guy is going to give me 2 nice answers. It's going to be fractions or whatever. If this guy is not a perfect square, so 17, 24, whatever, that means it's going to have 2 radical answers, 2 irrational answers left over. But currently we have a 25. So x equals negative 1 plus or minus square root of 25 is 5. And then you've got to have 2 different answers. So take the positive route, take the negative route. Positive route just means use the plus sign. Negative 1 plus 5 over 2 is 4 over 2 is 2. Negative route just means do all the math with the negative sign. Negative 1 minus 5 is negative 6 over 2 is negative 3. So these answers are x equals negative 3 and 2. Those are my 2 answers. Also, I could have easily factored that. This would be x plus 3, x minus 2. I could have factored this guy if I wanted to. So the quadratic formula is not the quickest. I could have done that in seconds flat and been done, but this always works guaranteed. And also that discriminant tells you, is it even worth factoring? Is it worth moving on as is? All right, next one. Again, quadratic formula. I recommend going ahead and actually doing these problems with me so you can memorize this. You won't memorize it if you don't actually work it out and don't actually try to write it down a couple times. All right, my a value, it's in standard form. So x squared x, and then there's no c value, equals 0. So a equals 3, b equals negative 6, c equals 0. Not because of this 0, but because there's no value there. Okay, so x equals negative 6 plus or minus square root of negative 6 squared minus 4 awesome chicks all over 2 alligators. You literally just plug it straight in. If you have a calculator, I recommend typing all of this stuff under the radical, not including the radical, but just the stuff under it in at one time. Negative 6 is a positive 6. Okay, this is going to be 36 minus 0, so it's just going to be 36 over 6. This guy is a perfect square, so firstly it's positive, so 2 real solutions. Perfect square means I'm going to have 2 nice answers, and I'm doing mostly nice answers today. Tomorrow we'll do messier ones, but I'm going to have 2 nice answers. Square root of 36 is 6. Okay, do your positive route, do your negative route. 6 plus 6 over 6, and then your negative route is 6 minus 6 over 6. 6 plus 6 is 12, divided by 6 is 2. 6 minus 6 is 0, divided by 6 is 0. So this guy is x equals 0 and 2. He was factorable though because I could have taken out a 3x, leaving x minus 2, and boom, x equals 0, x equals 2. I could have been done in seconds flat, but again, the quadratic formula always works, just not the quickest. All right, hopefully you wrote down that quadratic formula, so we're going to jump right in again. In standard form, so we're good to go. So a equals 2, b equals 4, and c equals 2. Make sure you're not writing the x's, just the numbers. Okay, quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. Okay, plug it all in. I recommend doing this part first, which really there's not much else to do on the outside anyway. But that's going to be 16, and then 2 times that's 4 times that's 16. So it's going to be 16 minus 16, so it's going to be a 0, which by itself tells me I'm going to only have one real solution. So this guy is going to balance on that graph. So the square root of 0 is 0. When I take my positive and my negative route, negative 4 plus 0 is still negative 4. Negative 4 minus 0 is still negative 4. I get the exact same answer both ways, as you should. You might want to do it both ways, but you literally just get x equals negative 1, which also means this guy was factorable because 0 is a perfect square, so I could have factored this guy, which I'm not going to just to save time. Okie dokie, let's go ahead and do another one. Again, he's in standard form. A is negative 2, B is 0. There is no x term in the middle. And C is negative 8. So make sure you're very careful when choosing your A, B, and C that you choose them properly. Okay, quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Okay, x equals negative 0, same thing as saying 0 plus or minus square root 0, negative times a negative times a negative is going to be negative something. 0 minus something is already going to be no real solution, but if you do this math, you're going to get a negative 64 over negative 4. Automatically, the discriminant is a negative, therefore there is no real solution, and you are done. As soon as you get that part of that question and it's actually accurate, then you can just stop. We'll go ahead and do one last one. I think you guys probably have it by now. But again, make sure it's in standard form. This would be so easy to factor. Anytime you're missing that x term, it's really easy to factor, but we're doing quadratic formula today, so a equals 5, b equals 0, and c equals negative 80. Okay, so x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. All right, this one, a negative and negative will be a positive. So this one I can already see is going to give me some positive answer. Doing that math, I got 1600 over 10. Okay, so discriminant is positive, meaning two real solutions. Also, 1600, hopefully you know, 16 is a perfect square and add 2 zeros. So 1600 is going to be a perfect square, so this guy is obviously factorable. Okay, so x equals 0 plus or minus square root of 1600 is 40 over 10. This one, you do need to do a positive negative route. This is probably one of the most missed questions, just because that 0, people go, whatever, and then just go, my answer's 4. But it really is 0 plus 40 over 10 and 0 minus 40 over 10. So you're going to get a positive 4 and you're going to get a negative 4. And how do I know that's right? Because my discriminant told me two real solutions. So I have to have two different answers, two separate answers. So if you ever do the math and you just get one answer and you don't have a 0 discriminant, you've done something wrong. And that does happen often. All right, so x equals negative 4 and positive 4. And that is how you do the quadratic formula. So your homework will be the pretty simple ones that are on Delta Math and a couple discriminant problems where you just solve for the discriminant. Also, I'm going to put a discussion board up on Canvas, and just go on YouTube and just look up some quadratic formula song videos and post your favorite one. Normally in class, I would just go through and show you some of the ridiculous ones because there are so many crazy ones. But just find your best one, and we'll have a good laugh. And hopefully somebody picks one that's my favorite as well, because I have a favorite. All right, hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.